Buenos dias, Gunners Collective TV. Back at it? You already know. Like a torta with some bad habits. Bye, bye. Let's get straight to that intro. Welcome back to the channel. And if you haven't already hit that like and subscribe button, make sure you go ahead and do that. Put your notification bell on all so that way you're directed in the direction of the dope content that I stay kicking. And I appreciate the support, man. I'm very humbled by it. So you guys want to hear a crazy story? Trip out on this, right? He was a active Norteno. Somewhere along the line, he got caught up in a situation that was his undoing, right? Wasn't his fault. And he went to the other side and he became a Northern Rider. He got associated and affiliated with what is known as a dropout gang, right? This gang that was created as an adversary, the opposition to the Norteno movement, right? Which is comprised of mainly ex-Northerners, ex-Norteños, and nowadays ex-everybody. They take in ex-Southerners, Woods, skinheads, even blacks, just a little bit of everybody. Whoever is embraced and who wants to be a part of that fold, that's who's going to be a part of that fold, right? Now, of course, traditionally, these S&Y gangs, these protective custody gangs, they come together. The mindset was that they came together to protect each other from these active gang members who sought them out, who were seeking, getting rid of them. But it kind of has always, I'm not a dumb individual. I'm not a dumb person. So to me, it was kind of like, why would you go to the other side, right? Where active gang members are not present and create a group or a gang that is in opposition of active gangs, but you have no direct there's no movements that like are going to put you in close proximity with them. I mean, every once in a while they do these integrating yards, and yes, I guess people get off, but for the most part, for years and years, decades, there was no interaction between these PC gangs and these active gang members. So it just boggled my mind that these gangs, the philosophy of them in the beginning was, these are our enemies. We need to protect ourselves, when your enemies are not even present. There's no interaction, right? But it is what it is, man. No hatred, no disrespect. It just, any intelligent person with the right mindset that's educated would sit back and think about, why would you join another gang when dropping out or being ostracized from that gang, being removed or whatever? Why would you go put yourself right in a mix again that something worse can happen? But it does, right? And to each their own, man. Just because a dude joins a PC gang or is on the other side doesn't make him a punk. There's a lot of different variables. There's a lot of different things that could happen that could have him placed on that other side. Now, ultimately, you have to sign a chrono to go over there, right? You have to be, you have to go to an ICC committee meeting, and they have to endorse you to that yard. So somewhere along the line, you had to agree with them that it was in your best interest to go to one of those yards. I see a lot of guys, oh, they just put me there. They don't just put you there. Okay, let's keep it real. Look, I'm a non-active Norteno. I shout it from the rooftops, right? I don't bullshit. I don't lie to people as far as, what I am and what I'm doing. But the facts are the facts, and I keep it real across the board, one way or the other, left and right. And I'll tell you guys right now, when you go to that committee, to that meeting, and you sit your ass down right there with those people looking at you, you have to give them a fucking yes or no answer. So all these guys that are running around, oh, they just put me on the other side. I don't even know how I ended up there. Fucking, it's not my fault. Look, man, you had to nod your head and say, you know what? Yeah, I'll probably be better off over here. Look, ain't no one knocking you or hating on you for doing that, but that's the facts. That's the facts. Now, there was other options back in the days. Let me explain to you guys before we get into this video and this guy's crazy story, right? But there was other options back in the days. One option was, and I'll tell you guys straight up with me exactly what's up, right? When I was in Susanville prison, okay, CCC, Susanville, I was on Lassen Yard and I was in the oil. And I was waiting, and I didn't know what the fuck was going to happen. I just got off on the yard. I fought another Norteno, so I know I was deemed all bad for red on red. I knew it was all bad for me. If I went back on the yard, I was going to probably be stabbed and jumped repeatedly until I was removed off said yard, right? And I had that coming. You know, I did red on red. I was in direct violation of the Norteno code, right? Call me piece of shit all you want, whatever. Until you're in my position, you can either go run to the fucking program office and tell the cops on the homies, or you can get off where you're mad at. The choice is yours, right? So I did what I had to do. I'm in the hole, and I was next to a dude named Shorty from Modesto. And he was my neighbor, my vecino, right? And he's like, hey, homie, where you from? From Merced, what's up? What happened, bro? I had to get off on the yard, fucking, and I ran him down the hole to get down. Then he gave me some game. He was like, look, bro, you're going to go to committee. You're going to be in the oil for about a month or two, right? Then they're going to put you up for committee. When you go there, that's when they're going to, you know, recommend where they endorse you to, where they send you. He was like, now, more than likely, bro, they're going to try to send you to an S&Y yard. They're going to present a packet that this is what they're going to try to do. He says, you don't have to do that, though. He said, me and all the homies right here. Now, he was part of a prison gang called Sucker Free that had just started up. They used to scream all night, sucker free, sucker free. They were anti-Norteños that still wanted to be Norteños. That's just the facts, right? But these guys had a few standards to them. And one was that they were not going to go function on an S&Y yard. They were going to go to 50-50 yards. They felt it was more respectable. And so he started running me down. Hey, bro, you should fucking go to a 50-50 yard. So, well, how's that accomplished? Like, what is that? So he ran me down what it was. And what it was basically was every other group was considered active, but the Norteños that were at that particular prison were not non-conforming Norteños, meaning they were still checking paperwork. They still were running together. They still were working out together. Same thing as any other GP mainline. The difference was they weren't up under the umbrella of a prison organization, right? Or they weren't considered that they had, your loyalties didn't lie with the Norteño movement. You didn't have to do something because you were told to do it or because you had to, right? You did what you wanted to do, but at the same time, that you were going to be held accountable for being in prison by prisoners. So I said, that sounded like more up my alley than going to S&Y. Bam, let me sign up for that one. So when I went to committee, they were like, okay, we want to endorse you here. Nope. I want to go here. And ultimately, they sent me to Jamestown prison. At that time, that was a 50-50 yard. Okay, now 50-50 yards is not a term or a label that was given by CDCR. No, it is amongst prisoners, right, that call them yards 50-50 yards. It's just a nickname that was made up. Okay, it was mostly made up because 50-50 yards only pertain to whites and Mexicans. Brothers, man, don't really trip off 50-50 yards, or they didn't back in the days. To them, it was just another yard, you know. But to whites, Norteños, and blacks, because the politics, to whites, Norteños, and Sureños, because the politics are so heavy, you know, you couldn't go to one of those yards even if the other group was not active because you're associating or affiliating or on a yard programming with what they considered PCs or non-actives, right? It gets thick, it gets heavy, it gets political. Anyways, I digress. With that being said, that's the way it was. So let's get to this guy's story. This is actually a solid individual, right? And so as he was an active Norteño functioning in prison, somewhere along the lines, he got caught up in a tricky situation. And he ended up on the other side on a 50-50 yard, right? Not an S&Y, but a 50-50 yard. Now, at that time, because of where he was from the Sacramento area. You know, his neighborhood that he was from, I'm not going to put his neighborhood on blast or his name on blast, but he's pretty well known, right? He was in a close association with Badass Snoop, who is the founder of the Northern Rider movement. He was a homeboy of his, right? A good friend of his. When Snoop decided to create the Northern Riders, of course, they distanced themselves from each other, but he was always, you know, he always looked at Snoop and admired Snoop as, hey, he was a real one. Okay. And so when he ends up on the other side, of course, people reach out to him. He starts to hang around with dudes who are riders, and he becomes associated and he becomes one, a Northern Rider. So he went from active Norteño, not in good standings anymore, to becoming a Northern Rider. Now, this dude never told on anyone, never checked in. He got caught up on some bad politics, right? And that's how he ended up on the other side. And he still had that flame burning in his heart, that Norteño flame. So he went with what he considered was the next best thing, which was the Northern Riders. Even though their mindset is anti-Norteño, the facts are, I've been doing time for a long time around Northern Riders and all that, right? The fact is this: a lot of those dudes still think they're Norteños. They still conduct themselves like them. They still act like it. They still wear red. They still do all that crazy shit, right? And it's because a lot of these guys are not happy with the situation that they're in, whether it's their fault or someone else's fault. They weren't ready to let it go. And so they utilized this movement. This movement changed. It went from anti-Norteño to just a hatred of Northerners to dudes that still wanted to be Norteños, but at the end of the day, they weren't in the best of standings on the other side, on the active side, right? And so that's kind of what it was. And that's why you had Northern Riders going at it on the yards with 2-5ers and the S&Y yards and all that, is because the 2-5er group is mostly comprised of ex-Southerners, ex-Southsiders, and they still look like the Southern, they still play the Southern part of the Sur gang. They still look like all that, right? And they still conduct themselves for the most part like that. So you have dudes that are still playing Norteño and dudes that are still playing Sureño. And I'm not trying to disrespect these non-active groups, but that's what it basically is. And so they weren't seeing eye to eye. They try to say, oh, it was because it's two groups coming up. And no, it's North and South all over again. And the fucking time repeats itself. Everything goes in circles. So that's pretty much what it was, right? Now, this guy ends up catching a case on the other side, right? So he's now a functioning Northern Rider. He ends up catching a case. And this case, it was a dope case. And this case took him to a federal prison. So now, if you know anything about the feds, not until about 10, 15, maybe 15 years ago, after Operation Black Widow happened, did the Norteño movement and the feds start to blow up? Did they start to accumulate more numbers, right? Because as far as Norteños or any prison organizations that are associates or affiliates with the Norteños in Fed prison, they were spread out. There wasn't very many of them. You had a few here, a few there, but not enough to get a foothold or establish really a yard for themselves. They were kept basically not segregated, but away from certain groups, right? Up until Operation Black Widow happened, when several of the NF prison gang were arrested, rearrested, or whatever, and given a Fed indictment and sent to the feds, did their become establishment. Because with heavy hitters going to heavy places, man, their mindset is recruiting. Their mindset is establishing a casa for the stronghold for the homies, right? And they did that. They did that at plenty of prisons, and they started to accumulate numbers. People started to recognize their get down, recognize their movement, recognize the real in them, and dudes started to gravitate towards that. And people will. You got a lot of non-affiliates, people that go into the federal prison system on drugs, guns, or whatever it is, and they're placed on a yard. And it's all about where you're placed. They're placed on a yard full of Norteños, and eventually they associate with them, because if you're going to function on a yard full of Norteños or Sureños or whatever, you have to kind of go with their program. That's just the way it is. And they do, and little by little, they start to inch towards becoming what they are. And of course, man, that's the ultimate goal, is soldados. The more soldiers you have, the more manpower, the more power, right? That's why it's called manpower. You got the man, you got the power. And so that's how that goes. Anyways, this Northern Rider ends up in a federal prison, right? Now, imagine being a Norteño in a federal prison where you're outnumbered by everybody. And that's how the Norteño movement is, right? The group. I mean, usually if they're placed on a yard, there's several Norteños on that yard, so they got a smooth team, like they're good. But imagine back in the days, if you're a Norteño going to federal prison and there's very, very limited yards you can be placed on, that's something bad's not going to happen to you, or you're going to have to do something bad to get up out of there. And the beat just goes on like a whisper song, right? You're just going to keep on moving around. That sucks. I've been there before, not to the feds, but I've been in that situation where no matter where you go, man, there's going to be some opposition. It's going to be bad. And it sucks, right? Because you can't do time. You see all these other guys getting visits, going to canteen, you know what I'm saying, getting a job on the yard, making a little feria, getting high, doing whatever they're doing, whatever they enjoy, right? And you're sitting there in the oil all the time. Every time you come out, boom, it's on, boom, it's on, boom, right? And you're just like, fuck. no canteen, no visits. You know, your people can't come see you. It's a cold existence, but it's a real existence. It really what it is. They don't tell you that in the fine print when you start gangbanging. Like, hey, homie, there could become a situation where you're fucking it's all bad for you. So, anyways, this guy goes to, imagine him. He goes to the feds and he's a Northern Rider. There ain't any of those, right? But again, mind you, this guy never went to an SNY yard. This guy never functioned around rats and these type of people. You know, people that are strongly associated with the SNY yard, but that doesn't mean you have to associate with the weirdos, right? There's dudes on the SNY yard that just come together and be like, fuck all that, bro. They're righteous DOs. They just don't want to be around that shit, right? And they distance themselves from that. And if they get selled up with a fucking weirdo, they smash them. So it just, don't believe the hype, right? There's a lot of stories behind the stories. So anyways, this guy, he goes to the ADX and he goes to Florence, Colorado ADX. He ends up in the oil. And he gets in association with a certain guy who is very high ranking within the Northern organization, right? The organization that represents the North, and gets to chopping it up with them, and is given the chance for due process. He's given the chance to explain his story to this guy. And, you know, let me explain something to you. There's dudes that have the power in prison, and it's well deserved. They've earned that right. They have put in the necessary work while behind them walls and are respected by all groups. And, you know, like Dubs likes to say, legends, right? There's dudes of legendary status, regardless of where they're from, just because they got a very good reputation behind the walls, a reputation that would scare people on the streets. That's not considered a great reputation on the streets, but within that prison system, that's the type of reputation people strive for. You know, they say, hey, would you rather be feared or respected? And there's a lot of dudes that'll tell you feared. And there's a lot of dudes that'll tell you respected. But then there are those that are feared and respected. Right? So they're very limited, but there are those. Well, he happened to be in close proximity in the oil with one of those guys. And as that dude took a liking to the youngster and seen the fire in him. And so he blessed him. He embraced him and he cleared him. Now, that's unprecedented because we have someone who was actually part of what is considered a PC, non-active, whatever you want to call it, prison group, right? That was anti-Norteños, that hated Northerners, that their whole get down is busters this and that and that. I mean, they go so far as to get a cracked Huelga bird with a Playboy bunny head, and it's just their slogan is very anti-Norte, right? Even though they used to have Northern in their title, now it's just writers, I guess, right? They did that. I believe Snoop changed that because he was embracing guys from Southerners, whites, and all that, and so he knew that the Northern label wasn't going to be it wasn't going to be good for what he was pushing, right? So, anyways, this dude gets he gets a second chance. Now, look, I know a lot of people that say, man, fuck that. They already did you dirty the first time. Why would you go back? But there's some dudes that just can't let it go. And it's not just can't let it go. See, there's a lot of dudes. It's not about being an active gang member anymore. It's not about that, right? It's not about going out there and doing crazy shit on the streets. It's not about that. When you're in prison, you know, some dudes go on the other side and they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed to be over there. That's not the type of man they are. It's not even, doesn't even have to do with gangs. It's the type of men they are. And so they're like, fuck, I'd rather be back on the other side, fucking taking my chances than being over here around the riffraff, right? And that's just the way it is. So this dude was an active Norteño. This is the only time I've ever heard of this. Became a Northern Rider. An active Northern Rider, was doing his thing. Went to the feds and got embraced and got cleared and became an active Norteño again. Subsequently, he's paroled, right? Embraced on the streets, loved, doing his thing, man. Just coming up, just working hard, beautiful family, you know, enjoying the fruits of life. He was once a lifer as well. He was given a second opportunity and he's making the best of it, right? So we have a man that literally went from active gang member, Norteño, gets life, goes into prison, somewhere along the line falls into some political smut, right? And it's all messed up for him. Goes to the other side, becomes a Northern Rider, puts in his work, does his thing, catches a Fed case, goes to the feds, talks to whoever he needs to talk to, clears his name, and becomes an active, embraced, cleared household member of the Norteno movement, paroles on the streets, gets a second opportunity, and he could be out there all happy and going crazy and gangbanging, but instead, man, he gets right to taking care of his family, right to having a good time, right to living life, man. You know, hey, dude's blessed. Doesn't really happen like that. And only the most solid of the most solid will be brought back. Now, I know you guys hear these little stories about dudes buying back in and all that. Look, I've heard of it. And if that's the truth, that's the truth, man. There's, you know, I would be skeptical about that. Motherfuckers take my money and then whack me anyways, right? It's not for me. I'm happy in my life where I'm at. I've been asked in the past, what do you think about this? Just in a roundabout way, what would you think about this? Because I still associate and I still talk to some active Norteños. That's 100%. And it's always going to be like that. I got homeboys that are still functioning, right? So I get asked little questions. And it's always, to me, it's always like, nah, bro, I got kids, I got family. Like, what can I contribute to the cause? Nothing. And I'm sick and I don't want to. I just don't want to gangbang, bro. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Hey, Spencer, there's a lot of fish in the sea. But anyway, so I just wanted to tell that story, man. You know, you just never know. In prison, life could take you down a bunch of twists and turns. This dude, like I said, he was a Northern Rider. Now he's an active Norteño. And by the person he was cleared by, like, it's done. No one could approach him later on and be like, hey, homie, you were this, and that. Find out if you want. You know what I'm saying? Hey, they don't just clear suckers, right? That dude didn't just get cleared because he was some Tootsie Pop, man. You know what I'm saying? He'll pop your Tootsie. Anyways, with that being said, thumbs up or thumbs down. Heavy's going to be the head that wears the crown. I'm going to continue to strive, struggle, and strive for what I believe in. That's the betterment of all people, man. All people. This video is sponsored by Barrio Liquors in Turlock, California. If you're ever in the Central Valley, Turlock area, the 209, cruise into the Barrio and go get you something cold to drink at Barrio Liquors in Turlock. #1 liquor store in all of Northern California, period. Also by Sticks and Stones Yard Service in Tucson, Arizona. If you need an estimate and you're in the Tucson or surrounding areas, make sure you Google Sticks and Stones Yard Service. He'll hook you up, man. I promise that. Just tell them Gunner sent you. This is the gun. Bang, bang.